Okay, thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining in. And here we are with our webinar on rise of technology in import-export business. We have a torchbearer of the industry, Rotarian Manpreet Singh with us. Rotarian Manpreet is president of Indian Chamber of International Business. Apart from being associated with the chamber, he also works with Rotary. He's an active Rotarian, and he also volunteers in a couple of other organizations as well. So there is a long list. As far as I know, Manpreet, he is Mr. Bankable, and he is the guy to go to and seek support, and he is indeed an expert in his domain. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining in, and I welcome Manpreet. Over to you. Uh, Please take over.
Chintan, thank you so much for inviting me here today, and it is definitely a pleasure to be part of this webinar. I mean, it's really amazing what you are doing with putting all the tech people together, putting them to charity initiatives to make people healthier and fit. And it's really a great initiative what we have here, and I'm really proud to be part of it. Today's seminar is today all about the rise of technology in international business. So, what after all is international business? It all means that trading across borders, supplying across borders, buying and trading and barter across your borders. So that is what it is all about, across boundaries, across geographies, and through different demographics and different geographies. I'd like to share certain presentation. There's just mostly graphics in that, so you can have a look while I'm talking. I'll just share 1 second. Can you all see it? Chintanji, is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So
if you can just click on the bottom middle and just click on hide. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thanks. So it's my learning session too today, when it comes to technology. So I learned something at the right in the beginning. So thanks a lot. Okay, rise of technology in international business. Like we were talking about, what exactly is international business? And it is all about trading and working across borders and boundaries. Now, it involves exchange, barter, buying, selling of goods and services both. Earlier, until a few years ago, we were mostly concentrated on goods. But nowadays, we find that the services have become much more prominent, and it is much more substantial when it comes to comparison with the goods, of course. So it is all across boundaries, geographics. We now even have trading across Antarctica and Arctic Circle. Can you believe that? I recently came to know there are actual shipments going to these places. Some of these places have become tourist attractions. There are people who have migrated to, some scientists have migrated to these places. And that's how even in these places are getting slightly commercialized. We're going to now talk about evolution of imports and exports. As we all know, earlier man used to travel on foot. We used to travel. The ancient traders used to have that potli baba ki, if I may so call it, put it on their shoulder, walk across cities, across towns, like nomads, going away for months, and then traveling, selling their wares, trading, buying from one place, selling to the other place, and so on and so forth. Over the next few hundred years, it migrated from on foot to through animals or through carts. And that's where you came across your revolutions for transport, where you had the horse cart, you had the bullock cart. So that speeded up a lot of your travel, your lot of your wares exchange, goods exchange, And that's how the world started becoming smaller. It was just the beginning. The next few hundred years or so, or rather few thousand years or so, it took to reach the stage where we are in the shipping industry, in the airline industry, traveling of people, of goods, right from vessels, air vessels, sea vessels, and we now even have submarines transporting the goods. In fact, we have the rockets doing that to the International Space Station. So that is also import and export, if I may say so. One country selling to the other sending into space. The ISS is a collaboration between many countries. So that is the level where we have reached today. And that also includes everything in the palm of your hand today. So your import and export have become so concise that today it has come down to your handset. And most of the items and the programs and your availability to information, which is the most important thing when it comes to imports and exports or international business, is access to information. Today, you can take decisions at the spur of the moment. Let it be the value of currency, buying and selling of your forex, purchasing your goods, and that has all become online or on the fly, if I may say so call it. We have the recent or the traditional conventional systems, which are one of the most prominent that we see even today, in spite of the transport by rockets or anything. Today, what is predominant is sea shipping, railroad shipping, truck and transport, and by air. As you can see from the graphic, most of the economic across border shipping is still done by sea. Your shipping industry is the largest transport system for imports and exports and for international business today. Yes, air cargo too is there, but when you consider the volumes, it's not so much. And it is still predominantly the sea industry and the shipping industry that is taking over a major brunt. Even in the times of COVID now that we saw, we will find that majorly the shipping industry was largely kept unaffected as compared to the rest of the industries. Reason being, if that stops, then we would have had a problem. Let it be for pharma, food items, or whatever. So that is the main bottleneck today, and the most affordable system that we are having for transport of goods and services also, if I may say so. Now, all of this has been depending on communication. Now, technology has always been depending on the evolution of communication technologies. We had the telephone from Alexander Graham Bell. Then in our childhood, we had the dial phones, and we used to pick up the handset, we used to dial. Then came on to the fax. Then the predominant mobile phone, which we had, the Motorola. I'm sure all of us would remember the advertisement. A kid goes and dang, 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 and that was the advent of the mobile phone. Then on to the semi-smartphone and today's smartphones, and then we have the smart watches, which we have today, and integrate them with the likes of Siri and Alexa, and you have a different ball game altogether. So this is something you find that the technology change is happening faster and faster and at an exponential rate. For example, from when you went from the typical two-piece handset phone to your fax machine, it was about 100 years or so. Then on to a mobile phone, it would have been tens of years. A handset to a smartphone, about 10 years or so. And then on to a smartwatch, we have evolutions every month. It is getting smaller and smaller, and the world is coming closer and closer. So this is something that we need to understand. That communication evolution is directly affecting your import, exports, and international business. So if you want to keep track on what's happening or will happen to the future of your traditional trade or business and commerce over international borders, then you really have to look at communication evolution. Now, in this painting, it shows it's a very small graphic. I'm not sure if you can see it on your phones. You can zoom it and see. It just shows the timelines that we've been having and how it has evolved over a period of time. Like 40,000 years BC, we had the cave paintings. Somebody used to come, paint somewhere, die over a few hundred years. Another generation comes, saw that, oh, that's how they used to hunt. Then 700 years BC came the Greek Revolution or the Greek influence. The 12th century became the Latin influence. You see the kind of centuries that are there between the two eras, if I may call it. Then comes the personal computers in the 80s, and then you have the software revolution that is coming. So personal computers from the 80s and were basically hardware systems. They were not dependent so much on the software evolution, but it was more on the hardware revolutions, where you had a physical computer that could do the computing for you, would reduce the time for your mundane tasks, and that's how you would go about it. Then we had Adobe CS, Keynote, and all these assistants that came in the 2003. Moving on to 2010, it became the emoji era, where communication between person to person or company to company ended up just being smileys. So you had the advent of email, but email also became more and more closer to your emojis. Traditional trade also started using smileys. I mean, that was very surprising in the beginning. And some people, in fact, started saying that, oh, this is not a formal email. And today, if you compare with that not being called formal, today we are sending messages on WhatsApp resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So all you need is, you're sending a transaction key and it comes, and, that is also not a formal business transaction, but that is how it has come to today. And then we had the VR era until a few years ago, where VR started. And today, VR has become a part of your normal system, although it has not caught on so much due to the backlog of bandwidth, if I may say so. So the bandwidth also is catching up. So the next revolution is definitely going to be the 5G, if I may so call it, which will give you access to bandwidth, which is much higher, where you can actually enter your clients or your supplier's office virtually and have a virtual conversation face to face, as compared to what you've been having doing it till date. So in the middle, you had all these revolutions of OHPs, the PowerPoint presentations, the graphics, and the printing era. So that all lied somewhere in between these centuries that has been. So evolution of communication, like I said, has been the one that has changed business traditionally. Now let's study the impact of technology. What has the impact been on your business when it comes to evolving technologies? Well, I'd like to classify them in basically 3 levels. One is the social implications, economic implications, and the plant level changes in the industry or the industry setup, if I may say so. So let's take the first one. Let's talk about social implications. Now, the world has become smaller. It's gone into the palm of your hand. So what does social implication mean? Earlier, for example, if you wanted to place an order, let's talk about the small consumer, the end consumer. So if the end consumer wanted to buy something, he would go down to the shop, buy something, pay for it, come back home. Today, you go to Amazon, you click a few buttons, and you're there. Next morning or the same day, within 2 hours, you have your goods in hand. So this is basically a faceless transaction. So your expectations become higher. A higher expectation of a consumer is more difficult to assess also because it's faceless and to satisfy. So what happens? You still end up going to your local kirana wala just to see his face sometimes. I'm not sure whether all agree on that, but that is definitely what is happening today. You're still buying from Amazon, but you end up buying from the local shops too. Let's come to expectations. What happens is the touch and feel of a product whenever you're buying is equally important to our social skills. So whenever we need to buy something, we want to feel it, we want to touch it. We have that feeling that, okay, if you're buying online, something is not okay, we're gonna return it or we're gonna get it exchanged. But still, that does not satisfy you. You are having higher expectations. So the systems are getting more and more complex, although they're getting simpler. As in, you can buy from the touch of a button, but the entire system is complex. It is bringing about you taking out your phone, opening an app, clicking on your product, making a list, it going to the backend in the cloud, going to the vendor, he prepares the order, tells the system that it's ready, it getting picked up by a courier agency or a service provider, getting delivered to you. So instead of you just going to a shopkeeper and seeing his face and him smiling and you're satisfied, here the level of satisfaction is not defined. Your expectation is there from your app that it should be easy to use. Your expectation is there from the courier guy that he should deliver however convenient to you in your timing. From the vendor, your expectation from the vendor is to pack it properly, ship it on time. So the number of expectations from one has gone to many. So it is all the more difficult to satisfy these kind of systems and complex systems, if I may say so. Then it has also brought about social changes. Now, this technology has, with the advent of, say, 10 years ago, Facebook, to today's systems of WhatsApp and Telegram, so your social systems are also evolving. You need to take care of these kind of systems also. So, for example, it's not as simple as going to your local shop and buying something. Now, it is also a system where you are going on an app in Bombay to a store in US and buying from him, or opening Alibaba and buying from a Chinese factory who's selling thousands and millions of pieces of that same product. So your social system is also changed. Instead of you helping your local businesses, you're now affecting somebody else's business across thousands of miles. In addition, your interactions, your social interactions have greatly reduced. From you going with friends to shopping to ended up sitting in your house and going online and buying what you need. The second most important aspect is your economic implications. What do you mean by economic implications? Not technology, like I say, it's for goods and services. So when it comes to goods, the goods need to be manufactured. When goods need to be manufactured, there's a whole different system altogether. With technology, with robotics, AI, machine learning, although these are softwares, but they have been helping manufacturing industry. And if there's nothing to manufacture, there'll be nothing to sell. So what would a service provider actually end up selling? So at the end of the day, you need to ensure that you have your manufacturing base in place for a service industry to survive. In the recent few years, we found that the manufacturing was reducing and the servicing industry was increasing. What happened as a result of it? A disruption like COVID ensured that you end up buying local with your international supply chains disrupted. So what resulted in that? You did not have capacity locally. You were buying just in time from a company in China for selling something in India. Let us take the example of multinationals. A white goods company would be manufacturing, assembling their products in Mumbai for selling to the northern part of India, for example, but their parts coming from Korea, China, Taiwan. And with the disruption happening, even at one of these places, your just-in-time deliveries have gone for a toss. So what has technology done? A, it has told you what you have with you to make an informed decision. Now, this is one of the most important aspects that we forget when we come to technology. Technology has given us the power for making informed decision. I have a habit of talking with examples. So we have got factories. One of the units is manufacturing for footwear soles. So there are certain, I would say, 23 raw materials that go into manufacture of this particular product. So when I was a child, I remember, my father telling the manager that go to the warehouse, check how many bags of X product are there. And we used to take a physical checkup literally every day. So there was this one guy in charge of this particular job. That's it. And that's all he had to do, every day go in the morning and go in the evening, see how much of it we began with, how much is it, note it down in notebook and total it at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month. And then he used to have this thing totaled at the end. Okay, now, and then suddenly he used to come up and say, oh, we don't have X raw material. And there's a shutdown in the factory. And not only to our industry, this used to happen to most of the manufacturing units that were in production. Then came the advent of your softwares and computer systems. So basically, it started with Excel. People started maintaining all this data in Excel. But what happened? You still had that guy going all these things, all the similar systems, similar entries, but he was first noting it down in your notebook and then entering into Excel, actually basically duplicating the task. Then we had softwares that we had with deliveries, which used to capture your inward, outward, your accounting systems, your ERPs. Now, this is something that really changed a manufacturing setup. So at the entry of the gate, where the person was anyways making the entry of the goods inward, and we already had the production guys who were already making the production entries. So this was reduced from multiple entry system to basically a single entry system. So you have just one person entering it when the goods coming in, and the moment you know how many goods have been shipped out, you know how much and where is what raw material. So this streamlined a lot of products. This resulted in saving a lot of money when it comes to buying raw material which you did not need. Let us say there are 23 raw materials that I spoke about. So you knew that, okay, that 4 are getting over, 3 are still there, but you ended up buying 5 anyways, that because, oh, we don't know when it might get over. So just in case, you keep it. So we used to have extra stock of all of these materials. So technology increased your productivity by reducing these mundane tasks to entry at a single point. Then we also had the issues of R&D. Any manufacturing unit required R&D. In those days, let us talk about the 80s. We used to participate in exhibitions, used to go to technology tie-ups, used to travel all the way abroad, find partners, look at which is the latest by reading journals, magazines, scientific literature, which used to come down physically. At the end of the day, either a industry used to be so confused as to what to adapt and what not to adapt, because by the time you know what is something happening in America, the magazine would have taken you 3 to 4 months to reach India and understand what it's all about. And by the time you actually end up implementing something like that, that company which would have already developed this technology in USA, for example, would have decided that it's obsolete or it's not viable and let's shut it down. So it was like repeating the mistakes. So all these things, with the advent of technology, with the advent of more connectivity, increased connectivity, started reducing. You started getting digital papers. You started getting information on R&D online. You had virtual technological joint ventures where you used to get technology. You could actually buy technology. You could be supported by technology with somebody sitting in Germany for a manufacturing process happening in India. So this is something that really changed. That is how technology changed the manufacturing industry in the 90s and 2000s. Now we are in 2020. What has changed? Well, I would say a lot. Let's talk about organizations and products and boundaries. Now, what happened with boundaries? Well, if you really ask me, there are no boundaries anymore other than what you need for visas and travel. You are free to speak to any country, any time of the day or night. You have your WhatsApp messages. Earlier we used to have the fax. We send a fax maybe after a week or 10 days, or we would get a revert. I'm talking about business communication. Previously, of course, letters, but let's not go that back. So we had the fax, which used to take about 15-20 days turnaround time. Then came the email, which still had about a week of a turnaround time to get all this information, get access to you. And today we have something like a WhatsApp. Once you are connected with somebody, it's as simple as that to send a message. Again, I would talk with an example. We have a German collaboration. So we have been trying to search for different technologies over a time. So one of these software companies got connected to us just day before yesterday. So we were trying to search how to actually, we got just the company name, what they do, and that's all we had. We were such a loss of all this information that, okay, what do we do? It took just 15 minutes to go on Google, search the company, find the name, send an email. They replied in 10 minutes flat, took a WhatsApp number, we exchanged information, and we realized that that technology was not suitable for us. So with a matter of 2 hours, we came to know that the XYZ technology is not suitable for us at all, which would have taken months earlier And that is how the communication has impacted technology and R&D and production facilities. So it is something that has really changed over a period of time. Talking about boundaries, we find that travel has become redundant. I will not call it obsolete, but redundant, especially in today's times. We find that we could do without most of the travel we have been doing traditionally. Let it be local within cities or across boundaries. I mean, I used to travel every 15 days abroad. I am at home since 6 months, and trust me, not much has happened. And there are things we've been doing virtually, with Zoom meetings, with Google Meets, and all these things. So it has changed a lot. So that is how technology has actually impacted manufacturing industry when it comes to getting new technologies, isolating technologies which have become either obsolete or not relevant to you. Going on now to plant level changes. What exactly are plant level changes? Well, let me say the actual unit or industry or a company that would face these disruptions. Let's say there's organizational structure of a company. There are many people who would have feeling that they would lose their jobs if XYZ technology comes in. An ERP, for example, when it came, the data entry operator at the factory who was making in the journals thought that, I'm going to lose my job. The computer is going to do all for me. So they never used to learn computers. They used to say, we don't know. They used to remove the plugs. We've seen those kind of days where people were scared of technology. There was a fear, there was a risk involved, and people were not ready to adapt to this change. But what happened? None of those people actually lost their jobs. Yes, but they had to upskill themselves. They had to change themselves. They had to adapt themselves. The fear is the first thing that needs to go, especially when it comes to technology. Talking about adapting, we find that today senior citizens are much more ready to adapt to changes than the others. If you look around, you find that you would have senior citizens attending Zoom meetings and connectivity with their families abroad, their children abroad. They can't travel. They are attending religious discourses. I mean, these are the kind of things that is called adaptability. Next, let's talk about transportation systems. What has impacted in technology for transportation systems? Now, this directly or indirectly affects the end consumer. How, you may ask? Well, let's say we have a transport company. It is fitted with your GPS technology. A truck leaving from Delhi to come to Mumbai, I would know where it is, when my goods would be with me, if there is a delay, why there is a delay, and also the contact details of the driver or the person who's in charge of the particular shipment. There's live tracking of the goods in transit. So it has completely changed transportation. It has speeded up transportation. There have been reduction in losses. So this is what technology has changed in transportation. Transportation resulting in reduction in time for your business transaction, for your imports, for your exports, and for your international business, of course. Technology transfers, I've already mentioned how it helped evaluating technologies, transferring technologies, blueprints of machines being transferred with the press of a button, coming down to your phone. You can actually open a blueprint on your mobile phone. It's as simple as that. Earlier, you used to go to a company, they used to give you a huge blueprint. You used to take it to your DTP guy. He used to remove a huge blueprint copy for you, and then you used to search for what you need. Now it's as simple as that. You have a digital document. It is tagged for XYZ. You search the tags, you get what you want, and you can zoom in, zoom out, search what you need. It's that simple. So that's how technology has changed. Money. Now this is the most important part of what you call international business. If you can see the screens, I would just read out the names and you would know what I'm talking about. Evolution of money. It's just a vector illustration that the graphics have been used. We used to have the barter system in the ancient days. In fact, some people are really reverting to barter even now. There are barter exchanges that are operating. So you can call it being full circle. Then we moved on to gold, using of gold to buy and sell products. Then we moved on to metal coins of the ancient era. From the ancient Indian systems, you have the Greek coins. Then you moved on to paper money, plastic cards, electronic money, and then the talk of the town, the cryptocurrency. I would take a minute or two to just discuss how all of these are affecting international business. I would go in the reverse order. Let's talk about cryptocurrency. Now, this is something that we need to adapt to. Of course, there are good things about it, and there are not so good things about it. It's not very common. It's not easily available. A common person cannot buy it. A common person cannot spend it as of now. But the same was said about electronic money until a few years back, or a few months back for that matter. Who would have thought that you would have been using Paytm to pay for the deliveries that are coming to your home? Who would have thought you going shopping and you're paying through your mobile phone? So similarly, the use of crypto is not far away. And the advantage is that it is currency independent. So irrespective of what you have, if you really start trading in cryptocurrencies, of course, there are 5 or 10 or 500 types of cryptocurrencies resulting in various other complications. But that might be similar to your dollar, euro, and you have an intercurrency exchange rate over a period of time. All of these that you see on your screen are still relevant today. So that does not mean that if the cryptocurrency becomes the norm, that your paper money would go away. Yes, it would reduce. Your coins are still in circulation. Today also, when you're going out, you still have coins in your pocket. You still have your gold reserves at your home, in your bank, and you still might be looking for a partner for barter, that you might have something that you don't need and you might exchange. But yes, barter is less. Gold trading is still there, but much reduced. Metal coins nearly out of circulation. Paper money still very relevant. Plastic card is the norms today. Electronic money is the thing that is happening right now. And we are looking to cryptocurrencies to change the world over. Now, how does it all affect international business? Let me talk by examples again. We had a customer, this I'm talking about the late 2000s, I would say. He would come down from Africa with US dollars in cash and his certificates that, okay, this is the money. I can't send Forex from there. So here's the money, ship the goods. This is the documentation. And that's how it used to go. So paper money in the 2000s, which is not very long ago, was still very relevant. It still is, you still have money in your pocket. Then over a period of time, those customers started saying that, oh, if you have a debit card or a credit card, we're going to transfer the money to you on your card. So for businesses, definitely not possible. For large transactions, definitely not possible. But for the small exporter, for the MSME companies, this was a very relevant thing to do. So all they had to do was ship out and they get the money transferred to their account. So the back end used to be all irrelevant to these two people who are actually doing the transaction, which was on the basis of technology. So you had the plastic cards, you had the paper money, and it was all moving towards electronic money. Now, when I say electronic money, in today's times, what exactly is electronic money? Now we know that we have digital platforms of e-commerce, digital platforms to trade, digital platforms for money. You have your Paytm, UPI, you have PayPal, and you have very similar systems. Now, how does it affect international business? You would say that what has this got to do with international business? Well, my friend, that's something that we have to learn today. You will not believe that until GST implication, there were a lot of small exporters. Because earlier, when you had an IEC certificate, you need not have your VAT compulsory. But with the advent of GST, when you had the GST certificate compulsory if you wanted to export. So what happened? Many small exporters who had turnover of 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, small exporters thought that either we transfer this business to other people or we take commission out of it and get out of it. So we lost about 80% small exporters. What changed? Very recently, it so happened that your backend started integrating when it comes to finance, especially when Amazon came out with becoming a global seller, listing on their global platforms. You had PayPal You could register on PayPal. PayPal was registered in India. So you could send your goods by courier and you could get your payment in 48 hours. It was that fast. So for example, if you're shipping something, somebody could pay you by PayPal, or somebody could pay you by plastic cards, or you could give them your card number, or they could transfer money to your account. And this is international transactions. You add, let's talk about raising funds for charity. Today, you can raise funds from charity anywhere in the world. It's as simple as that. You might have an FCRA account, you might not have an FCRA account. So, what changes does it make? It so happens that it is much easier because somebody is taking care of the technology, and that is not your headache anymore. Earlier, for example, if you wanted to receive some funds from UK, so you would have to go to your bank, the other person would have had to go to the bank, they would have to give both the banks the commissions. They used to send a SWIFT transfer, they used to come here, you used to submit your documentation. And not only charity, let it be even for your normal goods. You used to submit your documentations, and the documentation used to take a few days time. The papers used to be lying around on that banker's table for a few days, and it used to take about 2 to 3 weeks time to actually process things. Sometimes payments used to get stuck for months together just because an XYZ person forgot where the document was kept. So it was that unreliable system. With the advent of Swift, PayPal, it all became at the click of a button. So you just say, okay, transfer the money to this person with this bank account details, and your money is gone from one end and received at the other. Whereas crypto today is actually the physical currency that is being transferred. So as we all know, the back end of any cryptocurrency is your blockchain. So blockchain actually sends the block from one place to the other, which are part of a certain chain, and then sent from one end, assembled at the other, and you have a unique copy. Instead of sending copies of a particular product, you're sending the actual product. So that is what your cryptocurrency is all about. Now, what we find is going to be impacting in the next few years. Now, this screen is from 2018. This has already changed a lot in the last 2 years. Why I've used the data from 2018 is you can actually see the difference. Now, in 2018, they said that this is likely to impact, this technology is likely to impact your business most. So which the first one they said you would be cloud computing, which would affect 68%, business intelligence and business information, 65%, digital and mobile payment applications, 54%, cybersecurity and adaptive security architecture for your systems, 53%, Internet of Things, 50%, artificial intelligence, advanced machine learning, 42%, virtual reality, augmented reality, 31%, blockchain and distributed ledgers, 25%, chatbots. Nobody would have thought chatbots to be in this list, but it is 19%. Cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, etc., 14%. Today, in 2020, we find that this has changed. Let's say, Internet of Things has gone down. It did not affect so much. It did not bring so much of a revolution that we were expecting. It is still at a similarly stagnant place that it was about 2 years ago. Which has made the most difference? Cloud computing. Things have moved to the cloud. You are working from home. You're utilizing your systems from your office. So what is the most used? So I would say it is not 68%, but maybe around 80-85% that cloud computing has affected your international business or even domestic business for that matter. Digital payments and applications, it said 54%, but we are already at about 75%. 75% of your transactions are digital today when it comes to international transactions. Cybersecurity, with the hacking and hacking architecture, drastic changes happening. You are more reliable or more dependable on these security architectures, not on an individual level, but you're choosing systems, you're choosing websites, you're choosing your service providers who are secure, who can show you the cybersecurity that they're using and how they have been adapting to that. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, this is something that a normal consumer or normal supplier would not really think much about. But that is the whole base of your entire digital architecture that relates to your international business today. Virtual reality and augmented reality, they said 31%, but it's at 5% today. All you're doing is the heavy bandwidth consumption that was needed for that has not caught up. In fact, in India, if I say it's 4G, and if you use 4G in many of the advanced countries, there's a huge difference in speed. You can, those who have been traveling must have seen, when you open something on your phone on a 4G platform in India and on a 4G platform in, say, Finland, there's a huge difference. So we have not caught up. We are calling ourselves 4G, but is it really 4G? Is it really offering that bandwidth? Is it really allowing you to utilize your resources? Today we are sitting on 5G. We've got companies announcing that, oh, we are 5G ready and we're going to deploy 5G. But are you still 4G ready? Yes, you are much advanced than 5 years ago, where you were on 3G and you used to have loading, and you used to have text coming up and graphics not coming. Today you don't even save music on your mobile. You just go online or YouTube, or you have your Saregama apps or all these apps, and you just play it on the fly. So that is how your things have changed. This is how artificial intelligence has changed. Machine learning, the computer is seeing what you are watching. I'll give you an example again. You go to Google, you keep searching for XYZ, you're doing some research, you keep searching for it. Then you go to YouTube to watch your videos, you will find that you will have advertisements relating to what you were searching on Google. Well, you were not searching on YouTube, you were searching on Google, but it's all interconnected. It is called artificial machine learning. The machine is learning from your habits, from your behavior. And that is pushing your advertising budget today. From these companies and corporates, they are coming to know precisely what you're looking for, precisely what you want, precisely what you're searching, from where, when, which time of the day. And that is what is scary, but yes, entertaining and learning. That helps you to analyze from a business perspective that you have access to information. That brings us to business intelligence. Now, this is one of the key factor that I would say is not 65%, but 100% of your business today. You have to know what the customer wants, when they want it, how they want it. And today you have access to the information that is telling you what he actually wants, when, where, and how. Not only that, you can look at your past, you can analyze your data, you can see that which customer has been buying what, when, how, what went wrong, and you can analyze your mistakes. These kind of computings earlier, if you had to do about a decade back, would have, you wouldn't have bothered. Even if you would have bothered keeping a person who to analyze all this, would have got it mostly wrong. But now it is a matter of just computational seconds that you have this access to information. All you do is key in, okay, rejected orders in 2012, and you have who rejected what, why, and the data is on your fingertips. Similarly, that gives you tremendous power in your hands to analyze your customers to ensure that your international business grows and does not repeat mistakes. Making mistakes is fine. Everybody does make mistakes, but we have to try and not repeat our mistakes. That's what takes most of our brain work, and we need to avoid that. Coming down to chatbots, we would have never thought that chatbots would have meant anything. But if y'all use Telegram or websites, or if you go to your insurer's website or anywhere, you start and log in, you search for something. Let's say you want some insurance. You go, you buy, say, okay, I want travel insurance. You would have an instant chatbot coming up and say, oh, do you want me to help you? What do you want me to help you with? So instead of searching for something and not knowing, you have a chatbot who's got already machine learning capabilities, who would search for that information and give it to you. It's like talking to an actual person, but with restricted information. This is evaluating and this is evolving, and I'm sure it won't be long when you would have had a chat box on a Siri or an Amazon, or you would just say to your watch that you would say that, okay, give me an insurance plan for my needs. That's all you would have to say. And that bot would know your budget, your bank balance. Of course, it's scary information, but still, that's what we are reaching to. So that's something that we really need to ensure that we get these systems for our businesses. Now you would say that, oh, all hi-fi businesses or big corporates would be using that. But I would say the small MSME customer or MSME business can utilize this much more than any large business. That's where we come to e-commerce. Now, evolution of e-commerce over the years has been very fast and very quick to adapt. I'm not sure if you can read what is written on the screen, but let me just read it out to you. There's about 6 stages of e-commerce that we have seen in the last decade, where e-commerce was launched from 95 to 98. That was the e-commerce early stages, where they were selling books, music, and movies. You could browse large catalogs, and you could see movies, search for movies, and that's about it. Then came the 2000, 2001, where it started with electronics, home goods, your apparel. That did not reach India at that time as of now, but it was still evolving. Then you have the period from 2001 to 2005, where you would have all major categories and major people shifting from brick and mortar to coming onto websites and e-commerce portals. That is where the change actually started happening, from your brick and mortar to your online systems. Then we moved on to the omni-channel systems. Omni-channel means one person has it all. Now there were all these stores and these websites that were all linked to each other. Like, for example, I would put up a website which will be able to sell you insurance, your white goods, your materials that would go into, let's say, a washing machine. So you can buy a washing machine, insure it at the same place, buy raw materials or your shampoo or your detergent at the same place, and you have it all delivered to yourself. So that is what happened between 2005 to 2008. Moving on to 2000 up to 2013-14, you had all the possible portals being launched. Huge number of portals coming up, which had the pricing comparison, inventory, order status, marketing gimmicks, advertising. You could click on links, you can click on banner ads, and that is where all these things started changing. So that is where your computational power required was much more. Your screens were falling short for the information that was being provided. And that is when we had the smartphones with the larger screens, going up from 3 inches to 5 inches to 6 inches, and moving on to tablets. And that's what shopping did for you. Your PC started getting thinner and thinner and slimmer, screens getting bigger and bigger, smart TVs coming into the picture. Today, you're having smart TVs which are integrated. You can do your shopping on that. You can watch your movies on that. So how does it impact the small and medium companies? That is the base of this entire evolution, if you ask me. Let's consider a large multinational. Who is their consumer? The person, the lady sitting at home is your consumer. So for example, if I take that consumer away, what would you have left? Nothing. You would no longer be a multinational. You would no longer be able to sell to her. So what changed? Now, these small and medium companies joined the bandwagon for e-commerce. They set up their own portals, small, initially. Some worked, some did not. Then they started joining the likes of Amazon, Flipkart, started registering their products on these portals, started launching new brands, new products. The person sitting at home would be browsing for options. They, of course, knew what was being advertised on television. But then again, television was being reduced to a screen. Digital content has become more evident in the last 3 years than in the previous decade. So this is how you would actually have the change happening. You would see this change moving from small and medium businesses to the consumer at the touch of a button. Simultaneously, on the larger front, we have the paper-based business systems shifting to the EDI systems, which is the electronic data interchange. Now, what is the electronic data interchange, you're going to ask me? small and medium businesses selling on Amazon and uploading their inventory. That's one part of the system. Then we have the EDI system, which the governments and the businesses, the small ones and the large ones, started automating it all. So how was traditionally business being done? Well, you have one person at one end, you have another person at one end. Your customer creates an order, you call the and then you place the order. The other person receives the order, he enters into his computer, he generates an invoice, he sends the invoice, the customer receives the invoice, the customer enters the invoice into his system, and the transaction is complete. That's how it used to happen. What happened with the EDI system is you are both using the same software, your same systems, and which are merged together. So you making an entry in your system is automatically reflecting in the system of your customer. There's no duplication, no wastage of time, no depending on 4 people to do the same work. This is automation. This is the power of automations. This is the saving of time. Now, small and medium businesses, which were basically having 4 or 5 people, they started consolidating. So you needed only one person to do 4 people's job. But that does not mean that those 3 people were laid off. Those 3 people was utilized for other productive resources. For example, there were 4 people in a company doing the job of data entry. One person stuck with data entry onto an EDI system. The second one was told to develop new customers. The third one was put onto the field to ensure and take a feedback of your customer. And the fourth one was left for R&D, looking at new technologies. So this helped these small and medium businesses to grow phenomenally. With the same amount of resources, they were able to do much more by utilizing the electronic data interchange systems. Now, how would the next phase be? What would change in the world? Now, when it comes to international trade, if you watch your televisions or read your news, you would have the World Trade Organization, UNIDO, World Bank, Asian Development Bank on one side, which are funding countries. Then you have the Chamber of Commerces, which are putting chambers together, companies together, businesses together, help people interact with each other. Traditionally, you would find an Amazon talking to a Walmart and happening. But today, these systems being all online, even you and me can go online, search for an Amazon representative and say that I want to list my products on Amazon. It's no longer just a Walmart who want to put their products on Amazon. These are just examples that I'm using the names for reference purpose only. Today, I know of certain NGOs, I know of certain self-help groups, I know of individual karigars and small artisans who go to Amazon Karigar, upload their products on their website, upload their NGO on a website. A person who's earning 100 rupees a day is today competing with somebody who's making 100 million a day. So that is the power of technology that has changed international business completely. Of course, he is not being able to supply 10,000 pieces of his handicraft to US. But the person sitting in the US who wants that one product is happy to buy it directly from this consumer rather than go through the entire change and making it 10 times more expensive. It does not work for all the products, but yes, it is an access. It is a market access that is given to the smallest denominator in a business system, in an international business system, where he can actually handhold the technology available and sell to the world. So it is from the grassroots to the world where we are today. Well, that's your new competitor. If you say, who's my competitor today? Well, that would be the ideal consumer and the ideal supplier and the ideal competitor. Somebody is sitting at home, sitting on a laptop, selling products of, say, Nagaland to America. And this person buying from one place, selling from the other place, having no inventory whatsoever, chilling out, relaxing, that's your competitor. So that is what you are today competing with. And your technology is giving them access to this. But you also have the same tools, you also have the same access, and it's up to you to take it up. And the new challenge is what? Well, critical and non-critical purchases and sales. What do I mean by critical and non-critical? Honestly speaking, critical sales are something that you would want at a designated time, designated place, without any deliveries. For a business to business transaction, for a process requirement, for a chemical, for an industry which has to be there for a process to be complete. Those are critical purchases and still will be dependent on business to business deals. Then you have the non-critical purchases. That can be your garments, your shopping, your grocery, which you don't need today. That would come over a period of time. So these are non-critical purchases. Then you have the just-in-time deliveries. That is when you would have uh, to rely on your stable systems, tried and tested models that are not so much technology dependent. But technology comes into that picture when you want to know where your delivery is, you want to track where your delivery is. Micro exporters we just talked about, and your micro customer base. That is where you have the smallest person who's making the smallest of the article being able to sell to a company across the world, maybe in America. Reliability, well, it's as reliable as the system. So today we can have a person sitting in Northeast selling his handicraft to an XYZ person in Europe, receiving payment online into his PayPal account in a matter of minutes. So that is what the power of technology gives your small and medium companies. Dependability and cost factor and time factor are all interrelated. Well, it is better to have a reliable shipper than trying to do all yourself. It is very easy to say that I will go to the post office, send the courier to another post office there, and call a guy who will deliver my goods to my end customer. Yes, it's going to be cheaper, definitely. But will that show you as a reliable supplier? Will that show you as a reliable buyer? Well, I'm not so sure about that. So sometimes it's all about having a cost, time, and dependability, interrelativity that would define what system you need to use. So that is something that really needs to be looked into over the next few years. Well, what's the key takeaway if you really ask me? Well, automation and robotics is here to stay. People will be more smart. People will become smarter, intelligent, remove their mundane tasks, hand it over to bots and systems and softwares and automation systems, and utilize their resources and their times for learnings, evolutions, and devising better systems. So that is something we need to understand. What? Change is the only constant. Things are going to change. Things are going to change at a faster rate. So it is up to you to understand what is changing, how it is changing, so that you do not get left behind. It is you who needs to change, and it is you who needs to adapt. The world is growing at a very fast pace as compared to what it used to until a few decades ago. There are going to be constant disruptions. If you look at the last decade, you find that there have been 9/11, there have been earthquakes, tsunamis, natural disasters, unnatural disasters. We've been having in India, if you look, GST disruptions. We have now COVID disruptions. Something or the other is always going to be there. It is up to you how you change, how you adapt, how you utilize these systems to ensure that you use these procedures, these customer bases, these delivery systems, payment mechanisms to ensure that how you utilize this in your life, in your business, and your times. Well, if something's bound to happen, it will happen. The right time, the right person, and for the best reason. So you have to learn to adapt, you have to learn to learn, and you have to learn to unlearn certain things. I have done it. Will you? Thank you, friends. Thank you so much. That's all been about my presentation. I hope you all like it. These are my contact details in case you want to get in touch with me. Thank you so much. And thanks once again, TMI, and thanks, Chintan.
Thank you so much, Manpreet. Indeed, this was a great presentation. I would request the friends kindly put on your video camera so that we can chit chat, and the floor is open for questions. So whatever questions you have in specific, kindly share it with Manpreet and he would be happy to answer. Sanjay ji.
Unmute yourself, Sanjay. You are on mute.
Yeah. No, fantastic presentation. Thank you. And I think it was quite clear in itself. Basically, more of a knowledge session. And frankly, we know most of these things. And yes, your suggestions are well taken. Not much questions. Not any questions from me, my side.
I feel that, what happens when we know most of the things, we fail to implement these things in real life. That's what my practical experience has been about myself.
I think not, because with today's world, all these things what you are saying are already being implemented. If you don't, then you are left behind. For example, you are talking about EDI. Now the customs is implementing EDI from the next week. Okay, and they are implementing EDI for the normal exporters, so you can file the bill of entries, you can file the shipping bills, everything has to be done online. That means that becomes a real time. Like you said, the same system everybody is following, which was not there up to last month. So things are taking their course, and there is no alternative but to, implement these technologies for everybody. Same way for GST, for income tax, everything. Now we are going for faceless assessments and everything. So if you don't implement this, how are you going to do the faceless assessments? I'm sure there will be one day when you don't even need to submit your IT returns. I have seen in European countries, there are many countries, they don't do anything. Automatically, I've been in Brazil, for example. In Brazil, they don't file any returns, because everything is in electronic form. The moment there is an invoice, it is already lost.
So I think that is something we need to learn.
And this is something which is a continuous cycle, and we need to be with the wave. I mean, this is where we have to surf along with the wave.
So there was a time when all the bank staff, there were huge strikes on implementing of the CBS. Now we can't survive for 1 second without a CBS.
Right, sir.
Even a 1 rupee entry is going through the CBS only. No more ledgers.
Very true.
Like Mr. was saying earlier, there used to be, people used to shut down their computers. I can't do it. It is not my job. I can't handle a computer. Now everybody has to uplink himself. I mean, they have to learn. Otherwise, they are nowhere.
Right, sir. This is where the world is moving. We have to surf with the trend. We have to upgrade ourselves on a continual basis. So this is something interesting learning, and yes, good to know that yes, our government departments are also advancing with the new course of time, and that indeed brings us benefits of technology as well as the speed and efficiency. Thank you, sir. Senthil, sir, any feedback from your side? Just put on your camera. Yeah, Kajal, go ahead. You can just put on your camera.
Some people around. I will just put on the audio, sir.
Okay.
So, Manpreet sir, first of all, one of the most amazing sessions. I mean, very enlightening session, especially on the e-commerce part. We've always known the evolution of money, but we never. But it's always fun to listen to, relearn it via a story pattern or a pictorial pattern, which fascinates you for that moment. Like you said, that change is important and change is necessary. So, suppose I know I'm bringing something new on the table, and right now, looking at a competition. See, earlier when these things came into the picture, new technology was introduced. There's not a lot of competition in the market. Like there were hardly any people who were competing. So at that time, introducing something and waiting for it to become successful, waiting for the rest of the world to adapt to it, was something that they did, and it proved successful. But will something similar happen now as well? Like if I am looking for a technology which is 10 years from now, and if I start introducing it today itself, so looking at the competition in the market and in the global industry, will people adapt to it easily, or will people look for easier options which are going to come in future? I don't know whether I've come up with the question.
I'll try and answer that. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is, when you talk about adaptability, it is never an easy thing to do. Adaptability and change. I'll give you one simple example. Just few days back, I started getting messages on my Facebook saying that, oh, we are changing the system. Would you like to change to the new one? And I was like, no ways. I'm very happy with what it is, and I really don't want to change. It's changed what content is where, and then it started saying that, oh, from 1st September, it's going to change anyways. So we're just giving you a preview. So and these are immediate changes, so this is something that any kind of change is not easy. When you're talking about 10 years down the line, even if your technology is the most relevant and will become mainstream in the time to come, it will never be easy to change and adapt. I will give you one example that I have traditionally seen across businesses, across inventions and discoveries. The person who discovers or invents the thing or the product or the service, the first person rarely gets to make it successful. It is always he will have either a partner coming in who will leverage that basic information, package it properly, or market it in his system that will ensure that it becomes something completely different. You look at anything, let it be a product, let it be a service. You talk about Apple, iPhone, Microsoft, anything. It would always have been the one person made it, second person either bought it off from him pretty cheap, repackaged it, and presented it to the world. So not necessarily if you're the first person to do it, you would be the best person to do it. That's point number one. Point number two, even if you're the first and the best, you would not have the reach to reach that particular place. I'll give you one practical example that happened very recently. Now we have an innovation challenge that is going on from the British government for India. It's called the India Tech Challenge, and it is the India Tech Partnership. So what they're doing is, for AI and machine learning and for EV vehicles, they are giving out grants. £2.5 million grant per person to be given to about 6 people. That's a huge amount. And they're calling for things from all over the country. Now what happened was, they're hardly getting anything or right from the innovators. There are a lot of innovators sending, but what are the conditions? A, you need to be an innovator. Yes, that you are. You can do it. Your product. This is a changing technology. You would do it. Second, you need a person who is going to make that technology commercial. Now, this is where the first bottleneck comes. If you're saying EV and making an EV commercial technology, you would need an auto partner, auto component partner, or somebody who knows the industry, who's part of the industry. So that is something additional. Then you need somebody who is going to be providing you parallel funding when you need it. For example, you get a grant, you develop something, or you've done it, it is one of the best. Then what? The next stage. So these are the things that have evolved over a period of time. If you see, people have learned from each other's mistakes. So getting a product and technology which is 10 years advanced, if you're saying so, which is very good, you would need partners who would be able to give you that boost. So, it was all about exponential jump and leapfrogging, but now it is pole vaulting what is needed. It is pole vaulting to leapfrog, if I may use that term. So that is what is needed. Does that clarify somewhat to your question?
Yes, it does. It's not a very direct answer, because there is no direct answer, of course, to this question. It's more of an intuitive game that is supposed to be played when something like this comes into the picture. But yes, definitely very helpful. Thank you, Mantri.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kajal. Upadhyay sir, good evening. Not able to hear you, sir.
Hi, Chintan. Good evening. It was very, very informative. Though I am from the government service and hardly know anything about the business, but as even it was a very useful to me as a common man. So excellent presentation, very what you call the basics and what you be use in the government, that the fundas are clear about this. Thank you so much.
Thanks. The credit goes to Manpreet sir. And any questions from your side, Senthil sir, Tanmay, Prashant,
It's good.
Praveen?
Yes,
Yes,
Chandan.
sir. Yes, sir.
It's a good
Yes, sir.
presentation from Manpreet. It's from the currency evaluations, digital transformation for the business, how to you need to adopt the changes in the business. It's very important for everybody. How the global business model also changing, need to change accordingly. That's a good things touching upon by Manpreet. Thank you, Chandan.
Thank you, sir.
Manpreet, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Tanmay, go ahead.
Yeah. So considering the business intelligence parts and reports, is there any way or training methods do which maybe the companies like bigger giants like Reliance could, let's say, adapt to change technology? Like, because there are already existing ERPs which need to get connected to first get updated to the new system.
Tanmay, see, the biggest disadvantage today is, even when you must have seen the graphic for EDI, when there are two systems that are talking to each other, they should know what one is talking and what the other person is hearing. That is the most important thing. So you might have all the data that you need, but if you don't know how to get what you want out of it, that is a bigger problem. Again, talking about examples, as a child, I went to Chennai and I wanted to buy a packet of biscuit from a shop, and this was, I think, in the early 80s. I just couldn't explain a packet of biscuit to that guy at the shop. I had to actually enter that shop, tell him that, okay, this is what I want. And he did not know English or Hindi. I did not know the South Indian languages for that matter. And it was difficult. So the same goes for the machines and the systems also. Now, when we're talking about, for example, the architecture of Reliance Industries for that matter, what happens is, you have a particular system you're used to since decades. You have another system that has just come in and there's a migration happening and there's a huge disconnect, which would take its own sweet time. So you have access to information, but you don't have the access to knowledge how to extracting that. So the biggest problem today that we are facing in any industry is this matchmaking. And this is where the bottleneck lies. I'll give you what is happening today in this system being misused, if I may so call it. People are using this as an excuse that, okay, I have this information, but we are not able to get the right data out of it, or the data that came is irrelevant. So this is what is happening to postpone things, and when you are scared to adapt, just because you are used to an older version of a software. Sir mentioned a little while back regarding the CBS system. The same thing is happening in the corporate world today. Now, the government has forced it to happen, so you had to learn, you didn't have a choice. But when the corporate system comes, you get a buffer period. You are having a new system, you are migrating your data at one end, and you getting used to the other thing. So there has to be an awareness amongst your employees to adapt to new systems. That is the first thing that needs to be done. That fear has to be removed away. The actual technicalities don't take much time. Migrating of systems does not take much time. If you look at the banking system today, the banks that have merged, you're still using the old bank account number with the new bank account number, old IFSC. You go to the bank, you say, oh, you are merged, why you're not taking my money? So they would say, no, sir, you go to your old bank and get it. It is not that, let me tell you, that he cannot do it. He can do it. The systems are integrated at the back end. But just because he would have to open another app, another login, put the old number, put the new number, he doesn't want to do it. And the same goes for corporate today. Let us say a huge setup like Reliance Industries. They are merging with a lot of verticals, demerging with a lot of verticals. They have a lot of information to be put at one end. But until that happens, it is all people dependent. At the end of the day, whatever goes into a computer as an input is with your hands. Whatever is coming out of it is from your hands. So it is your people who need to be taken care of. It is the person who's making those entries. It is that staff that needs to be taken care of, and your data would come out without any problems. So train your people, and you will ensure that your systems are automatically in place.
Great. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Yes, Praveen, go ahead. Praveen, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Good. Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So I
Got it,
saw
got it,
your
sir.
screen which talks about 2018 projections. But one thing that I am very keen to see is 3D printing. Why has 3D printing not taken off in India?
Okay. Been there, tried that, if I may say so. Okay, what happened was there are two basic things that are needed for 3D printing. A, the material. B, the system that can do it. Now the systems are very much up to date. You can just buy a 3D printer and go ahead. But for example, you still have those, plastic material going into that 3D printer, which is printing your article or artifact or whatever it is. What you get out of it is very crude. It is still in a nascent process. Now you need to add a process after 3D printing that would actually polish it or paint it and give it the look that you need. So that is what is missing, which I personally feel. Like I work with, for example, IIT Bombay, and we had a project. They told us, oh, we've got 3D printers. Please tell all the industry to use it. And I was like, next question, use it for what? So they were like, no, they can develop prototypes. I said, yeah, but why would I do prototyping on a 3D printer unless and until I just need one piece out of it? And for making that one piece, I would have to come and tell your person how to write the code for defining what that system is, or I would have to give you the piece made out of wood. So if I'm anyways making it out of wood, why would I go to a 3D printer to do that? I would go to a casting guy and say, "Bhai, isko casting karke de do." So we are still at a stage where 3D printing needs to be evolved a little bit, and that is which is missing, because I've seen 3D printers the world over, and they are evolving. They have come down from huge blocks of meter by meter to desktop pieces, but still they are not able to get out what you need. You really need to finish it up. I would never go and buy.
Actually, it leads me to the last question from my side. So when we see all these projections by Gartners, Forresters, and others, is it something like the Gartner and Forrester projections are one thing for US and the advanced market, and it is different for India or Indian market? Or do we have anything like this is the projection for India for the next 5 years?
Okay, I will answer this with another question. It is like saying that the stock market is going to hit 80,000 by December. So if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't hit, it doesn't hit. Just because I have been good at postulating A does not mean that I will be good at postulating B. But yes, what happens is, let us say US market. There is a lack of awareness in India, if I really may say so. It is not that we don't have capabilities. What is missing in India is academic and industry connect. In the advanced countries, the academics already have access to these systems. For example, I mentioned the IIT has that system, and they said, oh, industry to use it, and industry says what? So they don't know what to do with these systems. Whereas in the advanced economies, the industries go to these people with their problem statements and say that, okay, I want this solved. That is what is missing in India completely. So that is where your projections go wrong. So because in the advanced economy, you know what you're working on for the next 5 years. So you can project.
I agree with you, Manpreet. In fact, I have a friend who completed his PhD when he became 50. But then his greatest problem, he says, is most of his professors in IISc Bangalore are busy trying to see what can they write to please the world's ICMRs and ICRPs or IEEE papers, whereas they don't go to their industries, they don't go to Indian sites and see what is the problem they need to solve Indian problems. So because they are more happy publishing it in international journals, they are not solving Indian problems, and I think that disconnect continues to happen. I agree with you on this. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
and other thing is, one size fits all solution does not apply
Never
to
works.
all environments. I mean, whatever study is being conducted in US, Europe, and other parts of the world does not apply to India, and same is the otherwise. I mean, sitting here, if you are writing something about US, so yeah, personalization has reached up to country level, and that is where the market dynamics play an important role.
You're right.
So that's it. Sudhakar ji, any questions from your side? Prashant, Leena madam, Individual, Vasant, thanks for joining in. Hey, Jamshid, and any questions, please put on your cam and then share your question.
So, Manpreet, thanks for this wonderful session. I mean, it was pretty lucid for even a lay person to, truly understand the overall economics of how trade and business has evolved with time. Just one question. What about blockchain? Well, of course, cryptocurrency somewhere is getting covered, but given that, with advances in SCM capabilities, where do you see blockchain in terms of maturity in the overall ecosystem?
I would say that blockchain is already into the main ecosystem. It is just that we are not aware of it. There are a lot of banks that are using it. Forget the Bitcoin. Bitcoin made it famous. But if you really see where blockchain is being used, you will be really surprised. A lot of backend systems are using this to send tokens from one place to other. Your Swift messages, your codes, your financial transactions at the backend have now graduated a lot to blockchain. Not only that, the world's leading financial systems, and in India, I would say ICICI Bank for that matter, has been working on blockchain systems since more than 2 years now. So this is something that is already happening and evolving. It is about, because the moment they start talking about it, they'll say, oh, Bitcoin is legal. So it's like talking apple to oranges, where people are unaware of the basic underlying technology. So I think that is what is missing. There is needed to be more awareness created about the base technology rather than the product coming out of it.
Understood. And what has been your experience in terms of, I mean, given that you are the president of the chamber and the members that are there, what has been their technology adoption rate amongst your members per se?
Okay, I'll just say it in a few sentences. We've got members from Sui se leke rocket tak, if I may say so. We've got a Kirana wala also, and we have a defense and aerospace company, and everything in the middle. So we have about 2,800 odd members across the country, and we lost audio. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So what happens is, when you say adapting to technology, so that is one thing, that is the first thing that we tell our members, that if you need any help whatsoever when it comes to technology, they are free to approach us. So they're like, "Arey, humko kya zarurat hai?" This is the standard reply. We are up to date. Humko kuch nahi chahiye. So then the first thing I ask, "Oh, do you have an online store?" So they're like, "Humko kyun chahiye?" That is, I was like, "Okay. Do you have a website?" "Haan, banai to thi." I'm talking about the general public. I'm not talking about the large companies or whatever. Across the board, any small and medium business, or they would have a website. I think, अच्छा, when was the last time you updated? उसमें क्या अपडेट करने वाला है? वही नंबर है, वही कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल्स है, वही प्रोडक्ट है, वही कंपनी है, 40 साल पुरानी कंपनी है. This has been the traditional. So adaptability, like I say, is very slow when it comes to it. But the moment we tell them, okay, do you use Amazon to buy your groceries? हाँ, 4 महीने यही किया है. So then I try and explain to these people, we have a connect once in a month or so. So we try and push them. We are trying to put the small people to Amazon Karigar to list your products. We are trying to tie up with a lot of platforms for SME companies which are listing their products for free. They will get access to the digital world, because today also the biggest problem is bandwidth. I mean, me sitting in a city like Mumbai have disruptions. Trust me, I have had meetings with world body institutions, and suddenly my internet goes off. Then shifting from broadband to mobile, and then you're cracking. And imagine what happens in rural India. So that is the kind, and we are thinking of going to AR and VR and all these things. I mean, where's the bandwidth for all this? I mean, even classrooms for children today, cities is fine. You go to any village, nobody is studying.
Correct.
So that is a harsh reality that we need to adapt. but we need to give the base structure also for adaptability. Matlab,
And
we go and
that's
tell, yeah.
sorry, please go ahead.
Please, I'll go on and on. It's better you talk.
No. So, I mean, the point that Chintan Bhai was making, that, in terms of the consumption of internet and how it plays a crucial role, this itself shows that, while we are talking of the era of 4G, broadband internet, giga fiber, and all of that, but still somewhere the kind of quality of connectivity is still lacking that kind of seamlessness that one would expect, especially for businesses, or even, as you rightly mentioned, for video applications like classrooms and all of that, which require that seamless capability. And yes, we still have to reach that stage. And then it's the question of really what is the cost per bit, that today, being very a predatory market that it has been, it becomes very challenging for operators to see how they can offer quality of service at the lowest possible price.
See, it is all about now a package deal. For example, you pick up any media company, they are earning more on advertisements and content rather than selling the service to you.
Correct.
Matlab, your mobile cost or data cost is irrelevant and they hardly make anything out of that. But taking your data and selling it to an XYZ person, that is where all their money is today, if you really ask me. And necessity wise, if you would like to know that where we really need this technology and bandwidth, I would say that would be for healthcare and telemedicine rather than for watching videos, or even schools for that matter. Healthcare is something that can reach every nook and corner. If you talk about the North India, Himalayas, or northeastern India, you don't have healthcare centers. Even central India, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gadchiroli, you don't even have a healthcare center. If he has to still go to a doctor, forget internet, uska to phone 3G pe bhi nahi chalta hai. You still use that, farmer still uses that tick 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 wala phone. So that is what, if you change the country's demographic, if you really ask me what would I want to change about India, if I ensure that access to reliable data speeds in today's times is given, that would change the country completely. And then we are a market of 1.3 billion people. Otherwise, we are still that top 1% is your customer.
Understood. Great, good insights.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions? Vasant, Leena, Indivil, Arshad? Okay, so I would request Praveen if you can put on your cam and share vote of thanks on behalf of all of us at TMI community to Manpreet. Praveen, are you there?
Yeah, I haven't prepared any slides for that, but
you need not prepare any slides. It's just saying a couple of things about TMI community, how you feel, and
as somebody else in the call said, a lot of things that were presented looked like, okay, we have seen this, but along with that, some of the insights that came along from the Indian perspective in terms of how it applies to India, and particularly the Q&A session where Manpreet, you answered some of the things. I don't think anybody in our companies will talk about it, because we are supposed to be always positive. We are supposed to only talk about our customers, and most of our companies are only talking to foreign customers. We don't talk to Indian customers. So that is a beautiful insight that I have got. I think I will use it in my discussions with my colleagues and friends, at least for the next few years. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time, Manpreet.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Manpreet, on behalf of TMI community for taking time and sharing your knowledge and enriching this platform with your experience. Thank you so much. We look forward for your active participation. Our walkathon is going on. We are walking 21 kilometers in 2 days' time. We do this every weekend. This is the 10th edition of walkathon. So stay tuned. I have already shared a link for becoming a member of TMI community. And have a great evening and Sunday ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.